Next is Ed Feigenbaum, an early colleague of John's.
Actually, Vladimir's example is a very good illustration of what I'm going to say, which is good because so many people have said so much, and so much of what they said is incorporated in my talk that it's good to have this different slant on it. In the late 1950s and the early 1960s, there were very few people actually doing AI research. Mostly the handful of founders, McCarthy and Minsky and Selfridge in Boston, Newell and Simon in Pittsburgh, plus their students, and that included me. Everyone knew everyone else and saw them at the few conference panels that were held. At one of those conferences, I met John, and we renewed contact upon his re-arrival at Stanford. That was to have major consequences in my professional life. I was a faculty member at UC Berkeley, teaching the first AI courses at that university, and John was doing the same at Stanford. As Stanford moved toward a computer science department under the leadership of George Forsythe, John suggested to George, and then supported, the idea of hiring me into the founding faculty of the department. Since we were both ARPA contract awardees, notice I didn't say DARPA because they didn't have the D at that time, we quickly formed a close bond concerning ARPA-sponsored AI research and graduate student teaching. And the joint intelligence of both of us was quickly deployed in a very rapid and, in retrospect, brilliant decision to hire Les Ernest to be the executive director of the new Stanford AI Lab that ARPA supported. Now, as you all know, you've heard many times today, John's first breakthrough paper was his 1958 Teddington Symposium paper on programs with common sense reasoning abilities. That paper represented deep theoretical thinking about how to make progress in AI. It also represented the quintessential John McCarthy as scientist. That scientist evolved into greatness, recognized in the citations accompanying some of the world's most prestigious awards. For example, his 1990 National Medal of Science citation says, among other things, quote, "The application of mathematical logic to computer programs that use common sense knowledge and reasoning," unquote. His Franklin Institute Award says, quote, "Key developments in the application of formal logic to common sense reasoning," unquote. This is the scientific persona with which John saw himself. Yet, shortly after I arrived at Stanford, the very first day, the first graduate student I met was Raj Reddy, John's first Stanford PhD student. The Reddy work that John was sponsoring and mentoring was as far away from theoretical AI as one could get. Raj was looking at specific waveforms of speech, counting zero crossings and other features, studying the speech recognition portion of speech understanding. I met Raj by wandering into a small lab with a PDP-1 time-sharing system that you've heard about that John had a major role in conceiving and designing. This persona was McCarthy as world-class engineer, for which he was famous, in some places more than overshadowing his purely scientific work in theoretical AI. For example, the citation for John's Kyoto Prize, which is one of the two highest scientific awards, science and engineering awards in Japan, said, quote, "The best known of his accomplishments," notice, "the best known of his accomplishments is the creation of Lisp, a programming language for symbolic processing." And later, "In the field of computer engineering, he proposed the basic concept of the time-sharing system and was involved in its development. This work opened the way toward the development of today's large-scale computers. There's little time here to relate John's many other engineering facets and contributions, although some of them have been already mentioned. One, for example, in the mid-1960s, his collaboration with Ed Feigenbaum and Information International Incorporated on the design of a large-scale, high-speed graphics system to be interfaced to a time-sharing system, and that resulted in a system that saw pioneering duty at the Stanford AI Lab. The engineering persona of John McCarthy was as important to the IT world as the science persona was to computer science. And John was pleased to be known as the father of Lisp and the father of time-sharing. Yet I think he wished to be remembered by his science persona, his contributions to theoretical AI rather than his contributions to systems and programming languages. Two final thoughts about John. He was generous and supportive of a very wide array of activities that he felt used computers in innovative ways with excellence. John had very little, as you heard, very little tolerance for mediocrity. The AI Lab had work on advanced programming languages, for example, SAIL, Ken Colby's models of the thought processes of psychiatrists and their patients, Chowning and Smith's pioneering work on applications to computer music and the printing of music, leading eventually to the renowned Karma Institute at Stanford, Harold Cohen's work on models of art-making behavior, and of course, you've heard cutting-edge robotics research. For a time, the Stanford AI Lab was, or was at least close to being, the foremost robotics research lab in the world, with hands, eyes, coordination, and mobility. Although John was quite direct when he gave his thoughts and responses to all issues, even sometimes to the point of bluntness, he was the most honest person I have ever met. He harbored no hidden agendas. No one ever had to speculate or guess about what does John really mean or really want. He meant exactly what he said. John also wrote a great deal, as you've heard, so the future will know his thoughts in some detail. Newton is supposed to have remarked about contributing by, quote, standing on the shoulders of giants, unquote. Future computer scientists will have the very broad shoulders of John McCarthy upon which to stand as they make their contributions.